Good evening, friends. Welcome back to my channel, Pediatric Classes. So today we are going to discuss about an important topic, that is asthma. Many of the requests I have received is regarding this asthma. People have asked about the management. Some people have asked about the triggers. So it is a very much of a requested video. So kindly watch it. I'm going to share my screen now. So before the start of the session, we have the channel analytics have shown that 80% of the people who are actually watching this channel are not subscribed. So I request you all to kindly subscribe before watching the talk. So this is talk is about the important topic, that is bronchial asthma. Okay, fine. So why is it important? It is important for undergraduates, postgraduates, for practicing pediatricians, everywhere. So I'm planning to have this session in actually two parts. So will be the first part, which will be dealing with almost everything of asthma. If possible, I'll try to incorporate the rest of the thing in the other sessions if I missed out something here. So this I will deal with epidemiology, pathophysiology, triggers, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. So as you know, childhood asthma is characterized by three things. That is a reversible airway obstruction, airway inflammation, and airway hyperresponsiveness. So there is a wild variation in prevalence of this asthma by the ISA series, showing that the prevalence is up to 25%. But this is a very good slide which I got from the IAP teaching slides, where we see actually the pathophysiology. If you see the pathophysiology, you can note that there are lots of cells like this mast cell, eosinophils, lymphocytes, etc., which is actually creating the or releasing lots of inflammatory mediators, which causes the inflammation. So what happens? So there is this all are causing a smooth muscle constriction here. Okay, so this is causing a smooth muscle constriction here, and then this also causes a plasma leak, which is actually causing the edema, and also lots and lots of mucus hypersecretions. So all these things will cause a mucus plugging, and these three things, that is the inflammatory mediator release, there is a constriction of the smooth muscles, there is a plasma leak and edema also, that will cause the narrowing of the airways. There will be lots and lots of mucus production. All these things will go on cause the pathophysiology. This contributes the pathophysiology of asthma. Another important thing is there are certain nerves which are here, which are the sensory things. I can make out here, I guess. So this will cause this will get stimulated, and this can actually trigger the cough. So if you see here, once there is a acute attack of asthma, and the child, suppose in asthma there is nothing called only an acute inflammation, but also there is a chronic inflammation, and if this things continue, this will go and cause a structural change in the airway. So that is actually the airway remodeling which is happening. Okay, so what about the clinical features of asthma? So asthma, as you know, there is persistent cough, wheezing, dyspnea, etc. Initially, it will be non-productive. Child will be exposed to some triggers. Child will develop a cough. And as the distress increases, they use accessory muscles. The patient becomes dyspneic, cyanose, and will have fatigue also. Okay. In the coming slides, I will be discussing about the severity indices and all. So what are the guidelines? So one thing we have to note here is the diagnosis is mainly clinical. Episodic symptoms of airway obstruction, more than 3 episodes if they are present, if they are reversible airway obstruction. Okay, how will you know whether it is reversible? Actually, we can give a bronchodilator therapy. We can do the PFR again and see if it's reversed. So reversible airway obstruction, and we need to exclude the alternative diagnosis too. Coming to the investigations, the gold standard investigation, if you ask me, that is none other than pulmonary function test. So as you can see from here, we have a PFR. What is PFR? Peak expiratory flow rate. This is measured by a flow meter. There is if you get an annual variation of more than 20%, and if a PFR is less than or equal to 80% of predicted, and if the patient is having an improvement of more than 20% after a bronchodilator therapy, that is regarding the PFR thing. What about this FE1? That is forced expiratory volume in the first minute. That is actually measured by spirometry. It is commonly used for documenting the severity of asthma. That is the FBC is there. This is also measured by spirometry. It is effort independent and is the most sensitive indicators. Even FE1, FE we 25 to 75%. This is also effort independent and it's also very much sensitive indicator. So the routine blood test, it may not help. The peripheral smear may show an eosinophilia. The X-ray test, if you do, you will get a hyperinflated chest. That's very characteristic of asthma. There will get hyperinflated chest. There will be bilateral symmetrical air trapping, patches of atelectasis, etc. You can actually do some allergic tests like RAS test, skin test, etc. But that is all like, it's not all required in much in asthma because it is a clinical diagnosis. Coming to the sputum examination is also rarely needed. Okay. So what are the differential diagnoses of wheezing? Suppose a small baby, maybe a 2-month baby coming to you with wheezing, will you diagnose asthma? Generally, no. So that the diagnosis, we are giving an importance here as maybe an aspiration or maybe a bronchiolitis or a foreign body inhalation. But as the child grows in the age group of 6 months to 3 years, the diagnosis of bronchiolitis comes as the first one, then some transient wheezing of childhood, and foreign body inhalation, congenital heart disease, etc. But as you can see, if a child more than 2 years come to you with recurrent episodes of wheezing, the first diagnosis has to be an asthma if you can document a reversible airway obstruction. Then transient wheezing of childhood and congenital heart disease come and as the other differential diagnosis in that age group. Now, coming to the therapy. So here actually, I've gone through the Opigai, Nelson and other certain guidelines. Then this is the best way to, especially at the undergraduate level, if you want to write an answer or if you want to know about it. So kindly understand that there are certain goals of our therapy. What are we actually planning to achieve when you start therapy for the patient is we need to maintain a normal pulmonary function. We need to maintain a near normal physical activity for the child, and the person should have freedom from acute asthma attacks, including the nocturnal cough. And patient should not have much of an emergency or doctor or hospital visits. We need to prevent recurrences. We need to make sure that the patient have minimal or no adverse effects from medicines, especially when you are using steroids. We know that we are specific the things called growth retardation and other things which are there if you are not careful about it. So make sure that the child is having a normal growth also. So coming to the long-term management, this involves mainly 3 areas. Please note, first is to identify and avoid the exacerbating factors that make the asthma worse. Second is the pharmacological therapy. And third is to educate the parents and patients about the nature of the disease. Here when I meant parents and patients, what means the bystanders also should know, or rather the parents should know what is this disease, because many times they are apprehensive about it. So we need to take them into conference. We need to explain to them. We need to also tell them about the steps to avoid all this exacerbation. I'm sorry for the typo error. It is avoid exacerbations and achieve an effective long-term control. So coming the first goal, that is to identify the exacerbating factors. As you know, there are lots of exacerbating factors depending on the climate, starting from the climate and everything, including animal gender, dust mites, pollen, fungi, even exercise, viral infections, smoke, changes in the temperature, emotional expressions, aerosols, drugs, etc. So there is the exacerbating factors are a lot. So then the second is about the pharmacological therapy. Here you need to know that we have 2 types of medications. One is the reliever medications, which is actually used to treat the bronchospasm and relieve the acute attacks, whereas there are something called controllers which prevent further attacks. So we have 2 things. Okay, please note we have relievers and we also have controllers. Now we need to know where are the drugs which are relievers and what are the drugs which are, these are the relievers. The relievers include short-acting beta-2 agonists like salbutamol, terbutaline, etc. And there are certain non-selective beta agonists. That means they will act on alpha receptors, beta-1 receptors, and beta-2 receptors. That is the adrenaline. We have anticholinergics like ipratropium bromide, which are also relievers. We have oral steroids and also theophylline. Whereas controllers are things which include inhaled steroids like beclomethasone, budesonide, fluticasone, etc. We have mast cell stabilizers like sodium chromoglycate, nidochromyl sodium. We have long-acting beta-2 agonists like salmeterol, formoterol, etc. Methyl xanthines like sustained-release theophylline, oral prednisolone, leukotriene antagonists like montelukast, zafirlukast, etc. See, please note there are two types. One are the relievers, other things are the controllers. So how can we determine what can be used? So this pharmacological therapy, this action. Sorry for this short break. Okay, so coming to the pharmacological therapy, the key steps include the assessment of symptom control, the assessment of risk exacerbation, then we selection of medications, selection of appropriate inhalation devices, and monitoring. So these are 5 A, B, C, D, E. There are 5 key steps in the pharmacological therapy. So first and the foremost is assessment of symptom control. What do you mean by this assessment of symptom control? What means we need to ask the patients certain things to know that whether the child is well controlled. Okay, so coming to the next slide, this is about the assessment of symptom control. There are certain 4 key features. That is, one is the daytime symptoms. So we ask the patients whether how many times the child is having daytime symptoms. That is like cough or dyspnea and all. If it is twice a week or less, that means 2 or less. So that means 1 or 2 times the child is having it. Okay, we can take it as like a control thing. But if there is a limitation of, if it is more than 2 or twice per week, that means the child is having it like 3 or more, we take it as partially controlled and asthma. Okay, so if there is a limitation of activity, in the properly controlled cases, no limitation of activity, whereas partially controlled will have some limitation or any limitation of activity. Nocturnal symptoms, none will be there in controlled case, whereas it will be there in case of partially controlled. And need for reliever drugs, see, please note this is same. Okay, need for reliever drugs, if we are having the usage of 2 or more, or rather 2 or less, it is okay. But if it is 2 or 3 or more, we take it as partially controlled. So I hope you are clear there. Please note 2 is the number. Okay, 2 or less is fine. Less is like taken as control. Whereas more than that, that means 3 plus 3 and 3 plus will be taken as partially controlled. 3 or that means 3 or 3 more than 3 episodes of daytime symptoms or in need of reliever drugs can be taken as a case of partially controlled thing. Whereas what do you mean by this uncontrolled thing is features 3 or more features of partially controlled asthma in any week. If it is there, we take it as a case of uncontrolled asthma. Now we need to know the assessment of risk exacerbation. That means we need to find out the risk factors which can actually predict that, okay, this child is a high-risk patient. There are certain risk factors in this patient. What are the risk factors? The uncontrolled symptoms, start of flare-up seasons, 1 or more exacerbation requiring hospitalization in the last year, any PICU admissions, exposure to allergens, non-compliance, comorbidities like allergic rhinosinusitis, food allergy, problems to child or family. Now, Coming to the third part, that is the selection of the medication. It's a very important slide. So this I have incorporated from the Uppiga. It is a very beautiful thing. So please note here, if the patient is having infrequent symptoms and no risk factors, that means whatever risk factors I have discussed, really nothing is there. There's sometimes having a symptom. So there is no requirement of control and medication. We can give SABA as and when required. But infrequent symptoms plus any risk factor for exacerbation, or if the daytime symptoms more than twice a week, or nighttime symptom more than once a month, then in that case we need to do give a low dose inhaled steroids plus SABA as and when required. We can even consider giving montelukast. Whereas when there's a troublesome symptoms on most of the days, or waking once a week or more, that means daily, almost daily child is having symptoms, and in a week itself child's mother is telling because of cough child has got up from the sleep, then again please note that is a case where we need to start a medium dose inhaled steroids for 6 to 11 years and more than 12 years low dose steroids plus LABA. Other cases, low or medium dose inhaled steroids plus leukotriene receptor antagonist or sustained release theophylline can be given. Whereas a severely uncontrolled symptoms, medium to high dose inhaled steroids plus LABA is recommended. Montelukast, short course oral steroids or low dose oral steroids in alternate days. Here I would like to tell one thing is the recent GINA guidelines, actually there are certain changes also, but these are the things we are given in your recent OPK and also in the Nelson. That's why I have taken it, because for exam purpose you may need to know both, I think. So in the part 2 of it, I'll be coming out the GINA guidelines itself for the practicing pediatricians. Okay. Classification of asthma severity, we can classify as intermittent, mild persistent, moderate persistent, and severe persistent asthma depending upon the daytime symptoms, nighttime symptoms, and also the peak expiratory flow rate. Please note here again, if in a week, if it is 2 or less, we take it as intermittent grade 1, whereas as the thing increases, we shift up from intermittent to mild persistent to moderate persistent to severe persistent asthma. So now another thing is the D, that is the selection of appropriate inhalation device. We can either select oral or inhalation. If it is inhalation device, we can use a meter dose inhaler, MDI with spacer, MDI with spacer and face mask, dry powder inhaler or nebulizer. Here, please note MDI with spacer more than 4 years. We need to use it, and less than 4 years, we need to also use a face mask. It has been found that even a bigger child, we can use spacer, because spacer, it has found to increase the drug delivery and other things, because not much coordination is required there with the breathing thing. So always try to use MDI with the spacers. Coming to the monitoring thing, how can you monitor? We should plan the visit every 4 to 12 weeks. The patient is asked to come to us, monitor the frequency of symptoms, sleep disturbances, ask about any disturbance in the night, physical activity, how is the child, how is the school attendance, how is there any emergency visit, PF. Actually, what you can do is you can actually ask the patient to maintain a symptom diary, which actually incorporates almost everything about daytime symptoms, nighttime symptoms, and also the school absenteeisms and other things, and even the use of reliever medications. So we need to assess the control, and then we need to tell whether I should step up the treatment or step down the treatment. And we also need to treat the comorbidities, if any. So this is that one slide which actually shows the stepping up and stepping down of all these things. So even see, this is changed from intermittent to mild persistent to moderate persistent. Generally, we start from the higher things, and you see if the child is not getting control, we can actually step up the treatment. And if the child is, but before stepping up the treatment, please make sure that the child is actually complying well with your advice, child is using the inhaler properly, whether the medications are there in the canister. So whenever we we call a patients for follow-up, ask them to bring the MDI, ask them to actually ask them, please demonstrate to us so how you use an MDI with the spacer, so that we can be 100% sure that the patients are using it properly. Then only if you feel that child is not getting control, you need to step up the medications. Okay. So this one slide, actually the previous slide, this few slides actually will tell us whether we can actually step up. If you are using a low dose inhaled steroids, so see here this one, if you are using, suppose you are using a low dose inhaled steroid, the patient is not in control, you can add a low dose steroid plus LABA, or you can convert it to a medium dose steroid. Okay, or suppose if you are using a medium dose steroid, the patient is not getting control, consider the high dose steroids. Okay, so as like that, you can actually step up or step down the treatment of asthma. Then main thing, education of parents. I told 3 key areas that they should know about the disease. They should minimize the exposure to triggers. We should tell them to maintain the symptom diary, and also the inhaler technique to be taught to the parents and also to the child, and written home action plan should be there. Suppose a child is having an exacerbation at the house, what the parents should do. So this is about it. There is an increase in the cough, breathlessness, and wheeze. It can be taken an excess as an exacerbation. If the PFR is coming 15% lower than the baseline, again we have to be careful. What is the home management? We ask the parent to give a short-acting beta-2 agonist MDI. If you are using a salbutamol, it is generally 100 microgram per puff. You give 1 puff every minute for 10 puffs. Then there are 2 arms. If the patient is getting relieved, that means the PFR is increasing, continue SAVA every 4 to 6 hours. If there is no improvement, or there's only a partial improvement, or if there is a life-threatening asthma, please give 1 dose of oral prednisolone 1 to 2 mg per kg and just shift the patient to the hospital. So this is about the grading of severity of acute asthma. If you remember from the last university exam for MBBS, and this was a question about the acute exacerbation of asthma. In that case, you need to write what is exacerbation, even the home action plan, and then about this grading of severity of asthma. I have actually a little bit arranged in the things from the OPK. This is there. So how a patient comes, the sensorium. If it is mild severity, then we will have normal sensorium. Otherwise, anxious patient will be, or in severe case, the patient may even be agitated. Okay. So color. In severe cases, the patient will have a very pale color. Speech, very important here. In mild, they can speak in sentences, whereas in moderate, speak in phrases, and this they'll have difficulty in speech. Respiratory rates, it's increased in all the cases of mild, moderate, or severe. What about the dyspnea? Dyspnea is present in moderate and severe cases. Use of accessory muscles are more in case of severe muscle, even with including a nasal flare. Suppose you auscultate a patient, you get a expiratory, plus or minus inspiratory, okay. If you've seen in mild or moderate, suppose you get an absent or nothing is there, this is called a silent. This is a very dangerous situation, that is a severe exacerbation. And about the pulsus paradoxus, it is less than 10 millimeter in mild, 10 to 20 millimeter in moderate, and more than 20 millimeter in severe cases. PFR more than 80%, 60 to 80%, and less than 60% in severe. Oxygen saturation more than 95%, 90 to 95%, and more than 95%. What about the pulmonary score index? There are different scores. This is very useful score index actually. There are scores like 0, 1, and 2 respiratory. Suppose it is a 5-year-old child coming to you, then you count the respiratory rate. If the child's respiratory rate in the range of this, you can give a score of 2. And you auscultate, and we are getting an expiration. There is nothing 0. If you get only terminal expiration, it is 1. Entire expiration, we are getting a wheeze, then it is given a score of 2. During inspiration, expiration, even without a chest stethoscope, we are able to hear the audible wheeze, we give a score of 3. And what about the use of accessory muscles? If there is an apparent use of a thing, if it is not apparent, 0, something doubtful, you give 1. Increase, it is give 2, and maximal activity, you have to give 3, score of 3, and you need to count all these things. Say, I will give example. Suppose a 3-year-old child is coming to you with a respiratory rate of 50. Okay, and you are getting an expression throughout, and there is maximal activity of the clearer, then your score will be in this area, this will be 2, this area, entire expression again 2, 2 plus 2, it is 4, and maximal activity. So 3, 2 plus 2 plus 3, that is 7. If it is more, that means severe. So severe means we should actually admit the patient in a PICU and observe and give treatment to the patient. Okay. So coming to mild acute asthma, I have discussed about what is a mild asthma in this previous slide. please have a very good idea about this. The child is almost normal, okay, except that the sensorium is normal. I meant the child is having tachypnea. There's no much dyspnea, but there is a rhonchi, and you can have almost a normal saturation. You can give a salbutamol nebulizations 1 puff every minute for around 10 puffs and see. If there is improvement, you can send the patient home on oral on inhalation or oral SABA 6 to 8 hourly, and you need to review the patient. Okay, if there's no improvement, treat it as moderate exacerbation, and we are given all these nebulizations. So now, or MDI. So now next you need to start the patient on the O2. As you know, moderate, I have discussed that the saturation is between 90 to 95 there. Then you also need to start an oral prednisolone 1 to 2 mg per kg and assess the patient at the end of 1 hour. These flowcharts are very important. Please note the answers whenever somebody is asking. It's for practice also. Even if you're writing an answer, so make it a point that the flowcharts are ready. If there is an improvement, we can in SABA inhalation is decreased to every 30 minutes and further decreased to 4 to 6 hourly. Prednisolone you have to give for almost 7 days, and then we can stop without tapering. Stop O2 if SpO2 is more than 95%, and we need to discharge the patient. If there is no improvement, continue salbutamol inhalation. We need to add ipratropium bromide 25 micrograms per 20 minutes. Also, you give injection hydrocortisone 5 mg per kg or even methylprednisolone 2 mg per kg and reassess at the end of 2 hours. So that is at 1 hour, then this all things will go, and then we are again reassessing. And if there is no response, please add injection magnesium sulfate 25 to 50 mg per kg in 50 ml normal saline over 30 minutes, may be repeated after 6 hours. IV theophylline bolus, if no response, go for IV theophylline bolus followed by infusions, and we need to consider even a mechanical ventilation. Discharge the patient if there is need for bronchodilator only is 4 to 6 hourly. Patient is able to speak well, and the saturation is also good, more than 95%, and PFI is more than 80% of predicted. So that is about moderate severe asthma. But if it is an acute severe asthma, again, please note the initial treatment includes nothing but oxygen, nebulized salbutamol and ipratropium. We also add actually steroids. I told you methylprednisolone 2 mg per kg stat followed by 1 mg per kg every 6th hourly, or hydrocortisone 5 mg per kg stat followed by 2.5 mg per kg 6th hourly. Then see, there are 2 arms after this slide. Please note, after this slide, there are 2 arms. The patient improved, you reduce the nebulizations to hourly and then increase the interval to 4 to 6 hourly, and then continue the steroids and also protropium. Then after that, you can stop it. Whereas the patient is not improved, reassess, confirm the diagnosis, injection magnesium sulfate 25 to 30 mg per kg in 50 ml normal saline over 30 minutes. They may be repeated after 6 hours. If patient not improved after first dose of Maxel, terbutaline infusion, load with 5 to 10 microgram per kg followed by 2 to microgram per kg, increase dose every 15 minutes. This terbutaline infusion, no, the problem is it's not much available in India. Then aminophylline infusion, if not improved, then still if the patient is not responding properly, we need to mechanically ventilate the patient. For theoretical aspects, you need to know this also. That's why I included that in the slide. Now coming to what are symptoms of this life-threatening asthma. So if the patient is very much fatigued or exhausted, or the autosensorium with cyanosis, feeble chest movements, absent breath, that is like when you auscultate, there is nothing is there. So I told you in mild, moderate, and severe, the color was pale. Here the color is almost cyanosed, okay? And no feeble chest movements, absent breath sounds. Oxygen saturation is less than 90%, and PFR less than 30%. There it was less than 60% in severe exacerbation. Where it is an acute life-threatening asthma, it is less than 30% of predicted. Here, same thing, O2, we can consider subcu adrenaline or terbutaline, salbutamol plus ipraven nebulization, hydrocort, improving, okay, reduced to every 20 to 30 minutes, and then continue the steroids also every 6 to 8 hourly. If the patient is not improving, injection magnesium sulfate, consider aminophylline theophylline infusion. Even we can consider an aminophylline infusion, but the recent GINA says that is not required, and we need to mechanically ventilate the patient if no response. So everywhere, please note, if there's no response, we need to actually mechanically ventilate. So these are the indications for intubation. Immediately we say cardiac arrest, comatose, severe respiratory distress, silent chest. There's a certain relative indications like hypoxemia, hypercarbia, metabolic acidosis, etc., we need to consider in intubating a child of asthma. So please note, it is not easy to treat a child of a life-threatening asthma. We need to actually monitor the child. We need to have a close follow-up of the child, and then we will be able to execute the maximum benefit of the treatment to the patient. So treatment of associated diseases like allergic rhinosinusitis, either by intranasal steroid spray or an oral antihistamines, etc. we should do. If it is a GER associated, please give anti-reflex treatment to avoid oral theophylline in such cases. So all these things, so it is very important. So to summarize, I would like to tell that, like, treatment of asthma we have discussed, and also we need discuss about the diagnostic thing and other things. So that is a lot about this asthma. I hope you are clear if about the treatment. If there is any doubts or clarification, we'll meet up again, and I will be trying to put up another video on the recent GINA guidelines of asthma soon. So if you once again, if you are not subscribed to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe. Please hit the like button and share it with your friends. Thank you for your patient listening. Stay safe and have a blessed day.